All right. Instagram, are you going to do what you're supposed to? There it goes. Hey, I actually have Instagram.
Hey,
It does not, the preview's not looking great though. Oh, I don't think we're going to be able to see it. I don't think I can stack it. I can't change it. That's so sad.
Uh-oh. Oh, well.
Oh, I learned that lesson the hard way.
Dun, dun, dun. Price is Right horns.
Let me see. Let me see if I change that. All right, so it looks good in 2 places, but it looks horrible on Instagram, and I can't overhead stack it. Oh.
You'll figure it out for your next one.
All right. Well, I'm gonna have to end it on Instagram. All right, is what it is. Okay, back to you. Hi.
Hi.
So for everybody who's watching, and you know, we'll have people kind of chime in as it goes through, but you are a self-proclaimed rock band and wrestling pro photographer.
The self-proclaimed greatest photographer in rock and wrestling. That's
rock
me.
And wrestling. Okay. Now, how did you get there? Because I feel like there is a story that starts this journey.
Well, it all began in 1971 when I was born. For about 6-8 years, I was one of the front of house mixers, i.e. sound guys at my church.
Okay.
And I had befriended dearly a couple named Alan Duke Butkovich, who were missionaries, but they sang up and down the mid-Atlantic area. And I started traveling with them and mixing them, and I would photograph them. And I was like, yeah, that's fun. And then at church, every now and then guest musicians would come in, and I'd like, I'd take a couple shots. And then of course I had tons of friends since high school that were in bands. So I'd kind of take pictures. I wasn't a photographer, but whoo, Larry, the Shadow, my man, tag team partner. What's up, brother? Good to see you. Kaiju Visual Arts coming at you back soon. You can ask about that later.
But, I will.
So I started finding that after years of mixing, I was getting tired of the aural experience and was more appreciating the visual experience.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm having more fun and getting more out of photo and video than I am out of mixing. So kind of on a lark, and I would take a camera. You know, you kind of have to sneak it in to like wrestling or concerts or what have you, because, you know, pro gear is not allowed. Nothing with a detachable lens. That's always what they say. And in high school, my friend Steve and I fancied ourselves as wrestling photographers. Larry was there too. We'd take photos at pro wrestling events, and Steve actually had built a dark room in his basement, and, you know, we'd make prints, and they were garbage and they were blurry, and maybe what's the National Geographic percentage you're supposed to have? Sports Illustrated, National Geographic, they used to say 3 out of every roll of 24 has to be publishable.
Okay.
And we were getting like maybe 3 out of every 24 rolls. So
I've never heard that before either. That's a new one for me.
A friend of mine, a very high-end lawyer, used to get into the Super Bowl as a runner, and because they used to develop film on site, and they would have you attached to a photographer. The roll would get finished. They'd wind it up. You'd run it to the tent. It would get processed. You'd just do that the whole game. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So he told me that that's what they had said, that 3 out of every roll of 24 has to be publish worthy.
Okay.
So I was like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But then a friend of mine was like, hey, I'm friends with the photo editor for Jam Magazine in Dallas, you should say, hey, here's some of my work. If you get me a pass, think of how well I could do. I'm shooting this, just in the crowd or what have you.
Right.
I go, nah, they're not gonna bother with that. But I did, and they wrote back to me and they said, all right, look, here's the deal. Aretha Franklin is only doing 3 shows. This was in 2011. Aretha Franklin's only doing 3 shows in North America this year, and one of them's at Wolf Trap. We want you to go, shoot the show, write a review. If you're good, you're in. If you suck, you probably won't work in this business. So it's like, okay. But I didn't have a professional lens, so I borrowed one and I shot it. And I write a lot for work. I'm not a full-time photographer. I'll tell you that up front.
Okay.
I write a lot for the work I do professionally, policies and stuff like that. I'm a government contractor.
Okay.
So I'm used to writing, and I'm sometimes, I always enjoyed writing essays because you can BS your way through an essay.
Sure.
Even if you don't know the material or read the book. So I did that, and I said, what do you think? And they go, hey, yeah, this is pretty good. And I said, okay, can I do Peter Frampton next? He's going to be here in a few days. And they said, sure. And PR people loved that because they didn't have to worry about a ticket for a reviewer and then a photo pass for the photographer. The fewer people and more self-contained you could be, it makes it easier on them.
Okay.
A publication or an outlet can just say, hey, this is Craig. He'll write the review and he'll shoot the show. What do we need to do? Mm-hmm. So I went back and did Peter Frampton. And while I was in the media office waiting, and in this business, there's a lot of waiting. You sit around and you wait, and you're escorted to where you need to be, and you're escorted back. The owner and publisher of Guitar International was in the room. And for whatever reason, I just said, well, how come I'm not your photographer? Here, I had one professional gig under my belt. And he goes, I don't know. Why don't you come out to my house and we'll talk about it? So then we found out he worked for the government agency I was currently working for. So he picked me up, and I started doing interviews and shows for him too. So it helped that I could write. It helped that I could do interviews. And it certainly helped that I could shoot. So as we got into the summer concert season and into the fall, I found myself at Jiffy Lube Live, which is the 25,000 seat amphitheater here in Northern Virginia in Bristow, quite often. And once again, having no business or right to say so, I kept asking the marketing representative and manager, who's your house photographer? We don't have one. Why isn't it me? I've done 5 shows. I should be your guy,
Sure.
Well, we don't know if we're going to have one, or we used to. Okay. So, we got through the end of that season or what have you. You fast forward to the middle of the next year, 2012. And I was interviewing Dave Amato, the lead guitar player for REO Speedwagon, who's gone on to become a dear, dear friend of mine. And when we were done with the interview, I said, hey, Dave, I'm not going to publish this until you all come here. And they were going to be the opening show of the season. It was REO Speedwagon, Styx, and Ted Nugent. Great triple bill. And I said, because I want to use my own photos with the piece. I don't want your band stock photos or what have you. And he goes, oh, you're a photographer? And I go, yeah. And he goes, would you mind coming early and hanging out with me and Tommy Shaw of Styx and taking some photos backstage? I was like, yeah, I think I can work that out. So
fine.
So I was shooting, for the band that night. And at the end of the evening, I went to the Jiffy Lube staff and said, hey, I was shooting for the band tonight, but I'm happy to provide you all with a few if you didn't have anybody here. And I think them kind of seeing me with an artist boosted my credibility to them. I don't know. That's just,
right.
And she said, well, no, we were going to ask you to be our house photographer anyway. And I was the exclusive house photographer at Jiffy Lube for 10 years. And I don't do all the shows now. They want to, my schedule doesn't really afford it. And they wanted to try and give some younger people a chance to shoot and stuff. I kind of really had a monopoly on all the venues in the area. At one point for about a 5-year period, I was the venue photographer for Jiffy Lube Live, Capital One Arena, Eagle Bank Arena, and MGM all at the same time. So
Okay.
there would be nights that I was literally triple booked. So I had two guys I would sublet to that I had to
Okay.
get, the venue's confidence up in them that, oh, okay, yeah, you can send this guy or that guy. But, now I do everything at Capital One Arena, anything at Eagle Bank that they asked me to do, probably about 75% of what's at Jiffy Lube. And I'll do stuff for Live Nation at MGM, but I don't shoot for MGM any longer.
Okay.
That's
Now,
it in a nutshell.
tell me about setting up for photography in such an environment, because you don't have any control over the lighting or anything, do you?
No, and that's what's great. And there is no setup.
Okay.
You go in, and the standard for most concerts, and there's some variance, and I'll tell you about a couple variances, is you should go in expecting that the terms of your agreement will be first 3 songs, no flash. You'll be escorted to
Okay.
where you'll be able to shoot from, which will either be what's called the pit, which is the area between the crowd and the stage,
Right.
or what's called front of house, which is back at the soundboard. And it's always a fun thing for some of us that have been around a while when someone shows up with like one camera body and a 50 millimeter lens. And I'm like, you do know it's front of house, right? And I'm sitting there with a 400 millimeter 2.8, ready to shoot basically from Baltimore, a show that's in DC. And they're like, well, yeah, front of house, that means up at the stage, right? And I'm like, no. So those are kind of lessons that some people, learn the hard way. But yeah, I mean, and that's what makes it exciting. I mean, the lighting is changing. Sometimes there is no lighting. You get a band that's recently come out of clubs and their lighting sucks, or it's non-existent.
Yeah.
Or like, I want to be in silhouette this evening. Oh, okay, great. Or
So then anybody who's watching that is a photographer, maybe this is something that's appealing to them, what would be some tips that you would give them in reference to lenses, how to function, and settings, because you're dealing with low light?
Well, it's not always low light.
Okay.
And then you can tell who's the real deal and who's not the real deal.
Okay, based on their
people,
setup.
People always ask me, who do you love to shoot? Number one is Kiss. It's a spectacle. The lighting is pristine. Taylor Swift.
Right.
It may as well be a photo shoot. I could hand a 10-year-old a Fisher Price my first concert camera and put them in the pit, and they're going to have the cover of Billboard, at Taylor Swift or Kiss. Iron Maiden, same thing. Elton John. Everyone doesn't have those budgets. We're basically budget. Where budget's not a budget. You know what I'm saying? So my basic, every show, a 24-70 2.8.
Okay.
A 70 to 200 2.8. And a 400 2.8.
Okay.
Those are with me at all times.
That makes sense. I mean, it covers the spectrum of like anything that you would come up against.
Well, yeah, and it can change too. There's been, I don't want to say numerous, but there's been quite a few times where you go in and they'll say, oh yeah, you're shooting from the pit, first 3 songs. And you're like, okay, great. And you get there, and for whatever reason, they'll say, well, no, there's actually a dolly camera track in the pit. We can't have anyone in the pit tonight. You got to go to the soundboard. Okay, well, if I didn't have my 400, I'm kind of screwed at the soundboard. With the 70 to 200. I could stretch it, and try and crop in, but you're going to lose so much, when you do that.
Sure.
So, I learned a lesson the real hard way. Billy Joel at Nationals Park. That was, quote, in the pit, but I still needed a 300 because the stage was so high, and we weren't really that close.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, well, that was great. And when it was over, everybody's kind of gathering their things. After your 3 songs, you have to be escorted to where you are. Someone from the venue and sometimes the tour stays with you. And when your time is up, you are escorted out. And
okay,
you either put your gear back in your car if you're coming back in for the show, or you check it with guest services, or you got to put it somewhere because they don't want you shooting outside of your allotment.
right.
So everybody's packing their stuff and they go, "Hey, Craig, we need you to go on the top of the stadium and shoot a wide shot of the whole stadium because the field was full and big stage for Billy Joel and everything." And I'm like, well, crap, I don't have a wide angle lens with me. So a friend of mine who happened to be there, I said, "Dude, I got to borrow your 24-70. I'll FedEx it to you tomorrow. Whatever it takes, I need it." He goes, "Well, why don't I just go up and shoot it?" I go, "Why don't you just give me the lens and we'll move along?" So that's what we did. And that was my first double page, what was called a double truck fold out in Billboard magazine, was
Okay.
that shot on a borrowed lens
Ooh,
that I begged the guy to
that
use.
brings up another question that I'm going to get to. I have one more question before my next question. What do you
Sure.
shoot with? Are you one of like those brand, like bougie brand people where you can only shoot with one type of brand?
For a long time, well, for the first 2 years I shot with a Canon Rebel XT, which isn't even really a professional camera, with a borrowed 70-200. God bless Jeannie and Harold Brown, who have a photo studio in New York and in Miami and in Leesburg, and they let me borrow that lens for 2 years at no cost to get my chops down.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'll be eternally grateful to them. They're so sweet. But then I was like, I'm buying a real camera. And this was like in 2012. So I bought a Canon 7D, which at the time was, pretty cool, 8 frames a second. And I was like, "Ooh, I'm really going to get those guitar solos. Watch out, Eddie Van Halen. I'm shooting 8 frames a second." And then I was like, "Ooh, I can't change lenses. This is awful. I don't want something to go in and ding the sensor or get dirt, and you're losing time. You're on such limited time. 3 songs goes by so fast." Bill Cosby was 60 seconds. Janet Jackson was 60 seconds that ended up going into 2 songs, which was okay. Stevie Wonder, 2 minutes. And when you're cut off, you are cut off. So every second really counts. So then I said, I can't be switching bodies. Lenses. This is ridiculous. So I bought a second 7D. And then I was like, oh, maybe I want to do a wide shot with a fisheye. So I bought a third 7D. So now I had 3 camera straps around my neck, and I'm choking myself.
I was going to ask.
And I was like, well, now I need to buy a harness. I'm not professionally trained. I don't have any photo, education.
Same.
I'm self-taught.
Same.
So I was like, oh, what can I do? Oh, there's these things called a harness where you can have a camera on either side. So if I have a camera on either side, then I can wear one around my neck. Okay, look at me. I have 3 cameras and they're all the same body. And it got to the point where it sounds dumb as a photographer, but I could use it with my eyes closed. So it's better, it's better so I can use it in my sleep. So
I've actually considered creating like my own like harness or vest, because I feel like I always have all these attachments. Like I want to be able to use like my GoPro so that I have like B-roll and stuff and like behind the scenes, but I don't want to wear it on my head because I like that vantage point a little bit better. But I have hair I like. I don't want to put a hat on it.
Well, and you don't want to look like a coal miner walking around.
That's true. I feel like
smile. I just got done spelunking.
I feel like it also looks too obvious too. Like if I can put it like on my shoulder, nobody really notices it quite as much as if I have this big old hunking thing hanging on my forehead.
Right. Well, I'm not allowed to shoot video, in these anyway. And believe me, there were people at Paramore Friday holding up their phones. I'm like, oh my gosh, man, put your phone down. Because I've been at shows where, you get somebody who's more of a fan who's, shooting because they like the band.
Yeah.
And, God bless anybody. Not everyone's outlet is at the same level and everyone has to start somewhere, but you can tell when someone's just there to fanboy or fangirl. When you're taking selfies while the band is playing and you're supposed to be shooting and you're dancing around. I forget who the artist was, but there was one occasion where the tour security just came in and said, everybody out, just because of that one person. Well, now you're preventing me from doing my job. So,
No, I could see that. Larry's comment is, Dawn, remember the car show? The last car show that we went to, and I actually have it back here in the corner. I got a gimbal for my Nikon, and I hadn't had an opportunity to play with it. I was like, oh, this is perfect. I got there, and I'm like, no, it's not. And then I'm trying to like attach my GoPro, and then I had something else attached to me. I'm like, I quit for today. This was too much. I was not prepared and planned.
Yeah.
Next time.
Yeah. Well, that's how it is. That's how you learn. I try to only make a mistake once. I don't mind making the mistake, but
sure.
It as long as I've gotten what I need, if there's mistakes, that's okay. I've only one time have I ever had a catastrophic mishap. I was shooting for Nile Rodgers of Chic, Freak Out, ding, 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 song, and he wanted, it was all pre-planned. He was going to come out in the crowd. I was going to go up on stage, take from the stage out of him in the crowd and such. Shot the entire show, a lot of interaction with fans and such. And I came home and the card had failed.
Okay.
And I was like, this is a problem.
Sure.
And they wanted some photos for trade papers and for his social media that night. And, normally I'm home by, 10 or so, because I don't stay for the show unless I'm really a big fan of the band. I shoot whatever my lot is and I go home. And I downloaded 6 or 7 different recovery programs, all at my own cost. And it was the 6th or 7th one that actually got the data off the card.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and we actually had that as a question.
Thankful. Yeah, lately. I was so thankful because I was thankful and then creeped out after. I was like, all right, thank you, Jesus. Yay. The day is saved. And then I went upstairs to get some celebratory ice cream, and I come downstairs and it's on image like 4,000, image 4,500. And I'm like, what is going on? So
everything. And
I reformat my cards every show. It was pulling everything that had ever been on that media, regardless of being formatted. So keep that in mind, everyone. Nothing is ever erased. That data is always
absolutely.
But yeah, that was as close as I got to a big problem. But now I use Canon R6s, which have 2 cards, and I mirror them. Everyone's like, "Oh, now you have great storage." I'm like, no. Now I have a mirror in case something goes wrong.
Yeah, so that's smart. I have that in my Nikon, but I don't have it mirrored. But that was a question that had come up actually twice. One in my DMV group, and then another photographer friend. They had not downloaded everything, like they had stopped a download and then done something, and they had lost everything. Mm-hmm. And then somebody else, I think they had a damaged card of some sort. I don't remember what it was, but the recovery software is definitely one of those things where you're like, you hope you never have to use it, but you're so thankful it's there for like that one time.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, I got 2 things. So Jim, which is one of your people, Jim North at Midnight Road Garage, one of my favorite people. Jim. He says you have to burn those cards to actually destroy the data. Yeah. And I would agree with that.
Or put a screwdriver through it, with a hammer. Yeah. Actually, in my government work, I was on a facility one time where there was this big contraption that was like 2 stories tall. It was inside, and they were shredding desktops and servers. And they would come out. They would come out powder. It was amazing. It was impressive and amazing.
It sounds like
make sure you're not wearing a tie when you're when it's your day to do the shredding.
No tie on shred day.
So yeah, I mean, Jim's right. The only way to actually be sure is to physically destroy the medium.
So the question that I want to go back to that I had from something that you said. And I've done a video on this, because publishing is not the same now as it used to be. And I'm assuming you've probably seen a difference in that, doing what you do. You said you had the 2-page spread. What has that looked like for you? Like, was there a point in time how do I put this? Now nobody seems to want to pay the photographer, and in my world, nobody wants to pay the photographer and the model, but everybody wants to have photos for their magazine.
Right.
Now you're doing more high-end stuff like billboard, things like that, maybe like Rolling Stones, if I had to guess. So in doing those sort of things, what does that experience look like from a professional perspective?
Actually, most of what I do doesn't go into print. Uh,
Okay.
9 times out of 10, I'm working for the venue.
Okay.
And and I've shot several shows where the photos never saw the light of day. They'll go into the venue archive. They'll go into Live Nation's archive. I shot Cat Stevens, who then became Yusuf Islam, who now I think is Cat Stevens Islam. He changed his name. It doesn't matter. Super nice guy. He was doing his 50th anniversary of, being an artist at Kennedy Center. And I was shooting through Live Nation for him. And they're like, you can't publish these photos anywhere. These are for his personal archive. And you're giving him the card at the end of the show.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I was like, okay, as long as I know that going in,
absolutely.
I wouldn't have been happy if I showed up and they said, okay, give us the card.
Right.
So I brought a laptop, and, when it was over, I ran back to the dressing room, while they're still out there taking bows and getting flowers and shaking hands and such. And I was like, I got to copy over as many of these as I can, because I shot the whole show. They said, go wherever you want. I was getting artsy fartsy. I'm like, oh, look, it's the chandelier and he's standing there, and I'm shooting in the, the organ loft. And, it's the best when an artist just gives you freedom and you don't have that limitation you normally have of the 3 songs, or 2 songs, or what have you.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, here we go. And when you're copying a file or you're downloading something, you get that little prompt that'll say, 18 minutes to finish, or 4 minutes, and you watch it go down, go down, go down. But when you throw a 128 gig card in, the first thing that comes up, 2 hours left. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But it's not going to be that. It's going to chop down, quickly within 10 minutes. Within 10 minutes, it's going to say, okay, 10 minutes is left. Well, unfortunately, his son, who was his tour manager, comes back. He goes, you have the photos? And I'm like, yeah, let me just copy these over real quick. And he leans in, he goes, hour and a half, we got to get on the plane. We don't have time for that. Can I have the card, please? So I'm like, oh. So I got like maybe 40 shots, that I took at the beginning of the show, which weren't even the best ones, because when I know that I've got a whole show, I'm relaxed. So they're, I don't want to say I wasn't on my game, but I was like, ooh, how artsy fartsy can I get, So I have like maybe 40 pictures of that. So to answer your question, 95.82% goes to the venue for their archives, or to Live Nation, or who the promoter is for their archive. And they'll usually throw it up on their socials, and that's it.
Okay. Now, are you allowed, because I've seen you have some things on your Instagram is where you post the majority of the concert event stuff. Are you allowed to choose what you get to use, or do they tell you what you can use?
I own everything that I shoot. A lot of bands will, unless, it's arranged prior that I don't.
Right.
And if that's going to be the case, I'm charging more, and I'm still going to have, the ability to use it. A lot of performers and artists, you'll get what's called a release. And within the release, and I don't want to get into names because I've signed so many, but sometimes there'll be a clause in the release, we own your photos in perpetuity. Oh, okay. Well, if you think so. Or, you can't post these photos anywhere. Only we can use these photos. And a lot of times it's not even that strict. It's pretty standard. It'll be like, hey, use the photos for who you say you're using them for. So if you're like, hi, I'm Don Brown and I'm shooting for DonLovesMusic.com. Okay, great.
Right.
We don't want to see you making posters out of them and t-shirts, publish them on DonLovesMusic.com because that's what you agreed to do.
Right.
But as social media has become more and more prolific, especially over the last 10 years, the lines are very blurred as to what's what. So I've had some clients, I shoot the show, they put some on their socials, but then they wanted to use them commercially. Okay, well, now you're going to pay me again. You're going to license them. Now you're going to have a license
Right.
agreement. What do you mean? You're going to have a license agreement. Not everyone would think to do that, or not everyone would care. As long as there's people who are happy to go in and shoot. And I did it. I don't fault them. For 2 years, I shot concerts. I didn't make a dollar,
Okay.
but I also had no portfolio.
Sure.
You have to build things up. But as long as there's people that are willing, to do this for free, not for free, as G. Gord Liddy would say, you don't do anything for free. You do things free. It can make it difficult. I've had some people say, "Oh, why should I pay you when I can go get an intern, over here from such and such?" I'm like, "Okay,
Right.
go ahead."
Sure.
And then maybe they'll do a great job. God bless you. If they don't, you have my number. So,
Yeah.
what did the Joker say in The Dark Knight? If you're good at something, you never do it for free. Now, of course, you do charity work, or there may be a cause you want to support, or there may be a friend you want to help out. But you're making it difficult on everybody. Don't say,
Right.
well, I'm going to shoot these for free because I need to make a name for myself. I need credit. Okay, well, I can't pay my bills with photo credit. I pay my bills with
Sure.
photo cash.
Sure. All right.
And
Larry
sorry
would
about this
like
chair.
it's okay.
Creaky.
Larry would like you to tell us about Baby Yoda's story.
Okay, not this one.
No.
I was at Walmart one day, and there was a little Grogu in his little carrier or prem or whatever it's called. And I bought one for myself and one for my daughter, my oldest daughter, because we're big Grogu fans. And I was like, well, my son doesn't even care about music, so he doesn't go to concerts. I took him to Kiss, and he was like, when is this over? Because I felt as a father, every kid should see Kiss at least once.
Right.
My younger daughter goes to all the classic rock concerts when she's home with me because that's what she likes. And my oldest daughter will come to, say, Panic at the well, not anymore Panic at the Disco because they're done, but Fall Out Boy, and so they have varying tastes. So I decided that I was going to start taking this little. He's upstairs. He's about that big, little Grogu that fit in this little, about the size of what would be the top of a Pez dispenser. And I was like, I'm going to put this guy on stage at every show, and I'm not going to call him Grogu. I'm going to call him Showgru.
Okay.
And he's going to, meet celebrities, and he's going to take pictures with rock stars, and he's going to be on stages. And after a couple of years, I'll give him his own. Once he has a back catalog of all his fun experiences, I'll give him his own social media channel or whatever you call it.
Okay.
So I should probably do that because he's got about a year and a half worth of fun. But I mean, he's been on Green Day stage, Def Leppard, Poison, Panic at the Disco. And if he's not on stage for a while, I had Velcro wrapped around the end of the lens hood on my camera, and then Velcro on the bottom of him, and he would sit on the end of the lens. And people think it's funny. I don't know. I think it's fun. Yeah, you have to have fun. And people in the front row, like when I'm in the pit, they're like, "Oh my gosh!" When I pull Grogu out and put him up on the stage or on a monitor or something, all the fans go wild. They're like, "Oh, Grogu!"
I think that's something that's always recognizable for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So we talked about the concert portion of your photography background. Tell me about the wrestling portion.
Well, aside from that poor effort of the shots we used to try and take when we went to wrestling in high school, a friend of mine who was a wrestler. In wrestling, you have superstars and then you have what are called enhancement talent, and they're not as prolific today because on TV shows now it's always superstar versus superstar. But when it was Saturday morning wrestling, you had what was called an enhancement talent. Larry would be an enhancement talent. I would be a star. So it would be Larry. I'm joking, Larry. You know I love you. It would be Larry's job. And in the business, they're called a jobber because you're doing your job to make the superstar look good. You already know who's going to win and who's going to lose. And actually, the enhancement talent are oftentimes the most talented athletes because they have to make the other guy look good.
Okay.
So, a friend of mine, his name's Bob Starr, he was an enhancement talent in WWE and NWA for several years. And then he started, yeah, I'm not lying, Larry, you know that. So he got into concert photography, but he was also kind of shooting wrestling on the independent circuit, which is where guys are who aren't necessarily in the NWA and WWE or AEW now or whatever. You got to get your chops somewhere. And some guys are perfectly happy being like what you'd call a local legend, you know, or whatever. I'm the king of Virginia or king of Maryland wrestling. Shout out Ryan McBride. But so he goes, hey man, I know you've been into wrestling for a long time and you should come out and shoot, you know, one of the events here at MCW, which was at the time was Maryland Championship Wrestling. And I said, oh, okay, sure. That sounds great because they would always bring in some WWE superstar to do a meet and greet before the event, you know, and I'm like, well, this is a good opportunity to meet guys that I loved growing up. And then I'll shoot the event, you know, the up and comers and everybody wins. So I started doing that and they're like, holy cow, you're pretty good at this. And I was like, well, thanks. I've never really done it before. But if musicians tell me that one of the reasons they like my concert work is because I can anticipate things musically and capture them visually. Wrestlers like my work because I've been such a wrestling fan and known people in the business for basically my whole life since elementary school. I know the storytelling aspect of it. I know what they're trying to do to get the crowd emotionally up and down. I know what to anticipate. And, you know, I have a feel for the match. And it got to the point where when they're discussing things they want to go through in the match, they would start including me to make sure that I would capture certain things that they were going to do.
Okay.
So it was just, you know, a match made in heaven. So then when, you know, WWE or AEW would come to arenas, they're like, oh, he could shoot wrestling too. Now they won't let me at ringside for those events for insurance purposes and such like that. You know, it wouldn't go over well if, you know, Chris Jericho got thrown over the top rope and kicked me in the back of the head and I'm not an AEW employee or on a 1099 with them. So those are just the two things I love to capture. And I love the storytelling aspect and that the guys on the independent circuit are just so into taking the crowd on an emotional roller coaster. Like, oh, our hero's going to win. Oh no, you know, now you know. And I have so many special memories of, you know, being in towns like Hollywood, Maryland, you know, where the event's in a fire station and there's 2,000 people there. And maybe that's like the biggest thing that's going to be in that town for, you know, 3 months. And so everybody's super jacked up and excited. And I'll be at ringside and something's happening and I'll hear like, Craig. And I'm like looking at a guy who's, you know, knocked out. It's like, Craig, to the left. And I'll, you know, they're trying to cue me up, you know, I'm like, oh yeah. So I did lose a speed light when someone came over the top rope though. That was not good.
Well, I mean, that leads into my next question then. Have you ever had anything safety wise that's been an issue or anything scary or like, you know, anything like traumatic, if you will?
The speed light getting kicked off the body of the camera wasn't good. When I shoot meet and greets, there's always security for the guest. There have been a couple instances where the celebrity, and I don't want to get into details as to whether it was a wrestler or a musician or anything, may have had death threats on them. So I was also given a security detail. That'll get your attention. I've been hurt a couple times. I don't like to shoot in clubs, really. I pretty much stay with arenas and stadiums, so usually not a whole lot's going to go wrong there. I was shooting at a venue one time, and I had been upstairs, and this was my fault. I was wearing some goofy, like, Bruce Lee shoes or something that didn't have much of a traction or sole on the bottom of them, and I was running down some steel diamond cut stairs, and they were wet. And the third step at the top of the stairs, I fell about 25 feet down the stairs, holding instinctively, just pulled the two camera bodies like this, held them like this, tumbled down the stairs, got to the bottom, and within what was probably an eighth of a second, but felt like maybe 30 seconds in your head. Sure. I was like, I'm going to be sore tomorrow, but at least I don't think I'm hurt. And as soon as that thought went through my head snapped back and hit a bracket that was bolting a pipe to the wall and cut the top of my head wide open. And I immediately, here's a reference for Larry, looked like Abdul the Butcher or Ric Flair in a steel cage match. I was gushing like a stuck pig. And I reached up and I was like, oh, I'm all sweaty. I'm probably not bleeding that much. And when I pulled my hand back, my arm was covered in blood. So
I can imagine.
I left the trail of blood all the way up those stairs. I bled all over the bathroom. And a friend of mine who I had gotten in there to shoot video, I was like, hey, I got to go get stitches or something. This is a problem. And he's looking back going, I'm filming. I'm like, oh. So he didn't help me. So a mutual friend who was there drove me to the emergency room where I proceeded to get staples in my head.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, talking about your head, we have to talk about your hair. I have to hear the story behind the hair.
Yay. As Patti LaBelle would say, is that your hair? And I would say, yeah, I hope so. I paid for it. There are extensions. It's about 50% mine. I'm a big Yul Brynner fan. So I've shaved my head since I was about 26 because I was losing my hair and I was starting to look like a bad hockey player and Jake the Snake Roberts. So it was receding, it was going back, and it wasn't growing, and it's curly by its nature. So it just looked dumb. So I shaved it.
Okay.
So during COVID, there were no concerts for me to do. And there's only so many action figures and such that you can take pictures of in your house. So I started watching Elvis movies, and I was like, I bet there's a lot more Yul Brynner movies than the 10 Commandments and the Buccaneer and the Magnificent Seven. And I came across a movie that was called Kings of the Sun. And it's like a B-level Yul Brynner movie. I don't think there's any other stars in it at all.
Okay.
And I was like, hey, that's kind of a cool look. He was playing like an Aztec warrior or an Indian or something. And the plot was they were going to sacrifice him on top of this pyramid. But, Yul wasn't going to have anything to do with that.
Right.
And he had a shaved head, but he had a long ponytail coming out of the back. And I was like, hey, that's something. How about that? So I said to my wife, I go, hey, what do you think of this? And she goes, I don't care what you do. And I was joking with my kids. I was like, what do you think? And they're like, no. I was like, okay. Well,
so that means I have to do it.
So I started kind of growing it. And I was like, it's taking too long. And I had a friend do kind of like the cheesy caricature logo, which has the ponytail coming around the side. And he had already done the logo with the long ponytail. And I was like, well, this is going to look dumb if I've got like, hair coming out of the back of my head. So I have a guy who's fabulous, who does my extensions like once every 2 months. And right now he said my natural hair is the length of what it was when I first came in to get to what the extensions were when I first came in. So it's about 50-50. So I think I'll probably do the extensions for another year and then just have them for adding body. I don't know. But it's just a quirky thing, and people make fun of it, and I really don't care.
All right. I mean, you do you. There's no judgment here. I was just curious because I felt like there had to be a reason that you did something that seemed that extreme, I guess.
That's the reason. And I mean, come on, there's only so many looks you can have when you have a shaved head. I don't like facial hair. I don't
Fair.
like beards. I don't like goatees. I wear different color glasses, you know, like Elton John or something like that. These are blue, which don't go with my shirt. But what are you going to do? So I was like, well, there's something. But no,
All right,
I won't add any colors or nothing. It'll just be gray. There's a little blonde in it because that's what he mixed it. But it'll be all gray soon.
I gotcha. So because I know photographers are watching, what would be some advice that you would give them if doing, the concert or wrestling is something that they're interested in doing? Are there any tips, tricks, or advice on, one, how to get their foot in the door, and two, how to maintain it once they're actually got their foot in the door?
Don't, because you're just going to get in my way. No, I'm joking. Kind of, but not really. Getting in is the key, and it's next to it. It was difficult before COVID, and it's next to impossible now.
Okay.
I say that's not always the case. I mean, I shot sorry, my footage. I shot Paramore last Friday. Excuse me. And there were 13 photographers in the pit.
Okay.
That's the crowd.
Now, let me ask you a question about that, because I think I understand, but I want to make sure.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you end up with that many photographers because they're handling different media outlets, correct?
And some of them aren't necessarily media outlets. That's where it gets kind of quirky. I mean,
okay.
I've done some rap shows where, somebody with the label. Oh, here's a photo pass. Okay. And somebody's in there shooting with their phone, and there's 30 people in there.
Yeah.
So it really depends on how tight a ship the PR and the management are. And fortunately, I'm so blessed I don't have to deal with that. The venue or the promoter handle all that for me. So I don't have to suffer what a lot of people go through of, let me find who the PR is. Let me find who the management is. Hi, this is Craig Hunter Ross. I would like to shoot for, name your website or outlet. Please consider me. And they come back. No one knows who you are. Thank you. Okay, sure, you can come in. That's what much of it is. And like I said, I've been so fortunate. I've never had to do that because when I did the Guitar International stuff, when the guy that owns the website submits it and goes, we'd like him to do it, I don't have to deal with it. Okay, Craig, you're approved to go do Peter Frampton. Okay, Craig, you're approved to go do Van Halen. Okay, cool. And I still work, Live Nation owns most of the venues. They don't own Capital One Arena. That's owned by Monumental Sports and Entertainment, who own the Caps and the Wizards. But Live Nation would say, okay, it's our show. Craig, we'd like Craig to shoot it. And the band either says yes or no. Well, when Live Nation is promoting your tour 99% of the time, it's not a problem. Capital One Arena, oh, you're using our building? Okay, sure, your photographer can come. Rarely is the what's called the quote house photographer declined. That being said, Paul McCartney denied me as the house photographer. Neil Diamond denied me as the house photographer. So, I mean, you never know. And I mean, think of it. If that most people don't do is just think of it from the artist's perspective, and the artists don't get involved with this. I've gone up to quote rock stars and go, dude, what's the deal with the release? I never had a release before. And they go, what release? They didn't even know there was a release. It's the management or the PR people, doing what have you. But, I mean, that's just how it is. So you have to have a legit outlet for which you're shooting. I mean, if I'm Gene, I use Kiss a lot, but if I'm Gene Simmons is a bad example because he'll take any publicity he gets. He loves it. If I'm Taylor Swift, I'm just going to use you as an example. Let's say there's DawnLovesMusic.de because DawnLovesMusic.com was taken, so you had to get one in Germany. What does Taylor Swift benefit from having photos on your website? Nothing.
Right.
I don't mean that harshly, but I mean that honestly. Whereas, okay, well, of course I'm going to approve, Live Nation. Of course I'm going to approve Billboard. Of course I'm going to approve whoever the local largest newspaper is, Dallas Morning News or Washington Post or New York Times or Washington Times, or Orlando Sentinel or whatever. Do I really need to approve CraigLovesMetal.net blog?
Right.
It doesn't matter. Whereas, there's some people just like, approve everyone.
Right.
So it really varies. So you have to have a legit outlet to shoot with. It helps if you're also going to do a review. I think I don't do that anymore, but like I said, with Jam Magazine and Guitar International, I did. If you can get with an outlet and they'll grant you an interview, and then you say, hey, can I come shoot the show so I have photos to go with the interview? That always helps. Think of what you can offer the artist or the management or the PR. They don't get anything out of dealing with you. I mean, in the age of multimedia and social media, there's no need for anyone to go, oh, we really got to beat the bushes so people know this concert's going to take place. Everybody in the town gather around the barn. We're putting on a show. They don't need that. The effort's on you. What can you give them? That's what I would say. And, be professional and do good work. And people will start to see it. And don't
agreed.
I don't want to get into it on that example. Don't feel like I took all these great pictures. I need to put them all online. No, you don't. Pick 2 or 3 really good ones, or do your little 10 photo maximum gallery on Instagram, and don't go. Well,
that's one of my biggest pet peeves. That's one of my biggest pet peeves sometimes when somebody does even just a photo shoot, like even, in my world, it's literally 6 to 10 pictures of the same pose over and over, but their face is just a little different. I have learned that, at least for shooting people, a lot of times, once you get past like the 4th or 5th photo, nobody's paying attention anymore. Like 4 to 5 is like the max of everyone's attention span. Well,
and that's it. I do a lot of, client corporate headshots and such, for businesses. And we chatted a little bit before you went live, about starting to do some Broadway and theater, type actors and actresses. You as the photographer aren't, not to go into Orson Welles mode again, but you're not just the photographer. You have to direct. You have to oftentimes, and now we're not talking about concert photography. Obviously, we're talking about one-on-one with a model or whatever. And you and I and Larry are in different worlds as to what we photograph. So I know what you all do. I couldn't do that because it would make my head spin. But even if you're just doing a lineup, it's not criminals. If you're doing a lineup of 20, say, salespeople for a company or a tech company or a car dealership or something like that, you still have to be able to get something out of them.
Something dynamic.
Well, yeah, because I'll be like, don't just stand there and, I'm like, come on. This is the first thing a customer is going to see in terms of an interaction with you. Do I want to buy a house from this person? Does this person look like they know what they're doing, is an engaged individual and is going to treat me with a semblance of professionalism? Does this person
Well, I
look like
think,
they're enthused about what they do and are excited to work
yeah.
with you? You know?
Well, a big part of that too, and I find it, in working with people as often as I have, is some of it's insecurity a lot of times. Like they feel like they don't know what to do with their face, they don't know what to do with their hands, they don't know what to do with their body. And then some people just walk in and they're like, hey, and then they have all of it, they have the poise,
Right.
they have the composure, they make it easy. I have definitely found that when you're dealing with the person that's uncomfortable or insecure, like in the situation, like just making them laugh gets them to loosen up like that extra little bit or more.
Oh yeah.
Make them catch something or jump up in the air, just something ridiculous, and then like they just kind of settle in just a little bit more.
Oh yeah. And you say make them laugh. I tell you, I do a lot of promotional photos for like songwriters or local performers or such, and people who want to sit in their basement and write songs may not necessarily be comfortable. You can be comfortable on a stage and not be comfortable in front of a lens. It's totally different dynamic, especially because when you're on that stage and the light is facing you, you're not seeing those who are looking at you.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I will be as self-deprecating as possible. That's good advice, everyone, for life in general. I'll be like, oh my gosh, I'll say something stupid. I'll be like, just relax for a second. I got to check the settings on such and such. And I'm like, and I'll say something. And I have the ill intent of knowing I'm going to shoot them because I'm going to say something that makes them laugh because I don't want the, okay, now we're going to shoot. I want the genuine smile that came from something that was said or something that was experienced or something that was felt. Not like, okay, now we're shooting. Look at me. I'm, what's her name? Who's that overrated photographer I don't like? Annie Leibovitz. Her and Ansel Adams. Oh my gosh. Overrated. Sorry.
It's okay.
We can't all be Larry.
So
the kaiju visual arts. Before I forget, we brought that up with Larry. I think it was during COVID, we were bored and there wasn't anything to shoot. And I was like, hey man, let's get some action figures and some pyro and stuff like that and just blow things up and take pictures. And I bought this like replica Godzilla and we filled this tub of water in my backyard and I was like shooting a hose in it so it would like all gurgle up. And we like lit some pyro behind it and shot it like really dark, like F20. And like set up like strobes around. Oh my gosh, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. Larry Bradby overrated. How dare you?
Well, that's Angel, right?
Yeah, still. Let it go.
that his bestie will throw him under the bus apparently.
But we were joking because kaiju is a monster style in Japan. So I had a graphic artist make this thing that said kaiju visual art. So next time Larry and I are bored, we're going to do like some more action figure pyro.
I love it. It sounds amazing. I've actually considered doing that with, I have a little one in my life that's 5 and, all like the Lego people and stuff. I'm like, I could do something fun with this. I don't know what, but I could do something with this.
I've already done that.
Oh, I don't doubt that. Your son definitely seems to have a mountain of them.
Yeah. Shooting Lego's fun, but yeah, I mean, you got to find something. And we just, what did we say it was? We said it was the collaboration no one asked for, but that everyone wanted. I think
I could see that. I could see that. I had another question for you. Now I don't remember what it was. Oh. What were we talking about before the
getting in the door? Godzilla. Me not wanting you to get in the door. Staying out of my way.
There was something else I wanted to ask based on what you said, but now I don't remember what it was.
Too many people in the pit. Making people laugh. Natural posing.
Yeah. I now don't remember what it was.
What do you think, Larry? Ask something, Larry. I've known Larry so long.
Well, yeah, I found it interesting when I posted about the live, like there were a lot of people that we had in common, even though you and I had never met before. Jim was actually the person who had me add you because I hadn't heard of you until Jim mentioned you.
No one's
And
heard of
then
I am
because you're not overrated.
I'm self-proclaimed. That's why, because no one else will proclaim it. I remember I was doing a meet and greet for Duran Duran many years ago, and somebody came in afterwards, and I was name dropper. I was standing there with John Taylor and Nick Rhodes, and we're just kind of BSing, you know, things are wrapping up, and I took a photo with them, and then some guy came in, and he's like, "Oh, what's your name?" And I was like, "Craig Hunter Ross." He goes, "Oh yeah, man, I know you. I see your work all over the place." And I hadn't been shooting for like more than 8 months. I'm like, "Dude, you haven't seen me anywhere. Don't stroke me. You haven't seen anything."
Well,
But
so at this stage of the game, does anybody ever like recognize you while you're out and about? Because I still find that
yes,
awkward when somebody's like, "Hey, you're so and so, right?" And I'm like, "Why?"
just because they want a picture with Showgrew, usually. But some people. Well, the other thing is too. I've lived here my whole life. I mean, I was born in Alexandria Hospital.
Okay.
Just like Stuart Copeland of the Police. When I interviewed him, I was like, "Hey, you were born in Alexandria Hospital. So was I." And he's like, "We will be brothers forever." But so that was fun. But I would go to Target. "Oh, you know, you're my daughter's dad. You're my son's dad." You know, if you've been somewhere your whole life, and this is such a transient area, there's going to be people that recognize you from one place to the other. And I always feel bad because they'll recognize me, but I don't know where I'm supposed to know them from, you know?
Yeah, I've had that happen.
So, "Hi, I'm so-and-so." "Oh, okay." And you were the sound guy at church. "Oh, okay. Yeah. I recognize the back of your head because you were facing that way." I was in the back. "Oh, now I know who you are."
Turn around real quick for me.
Yeah. And I'm not super good with names because I always tell people it's easy for 1,000 people to remember the one guy, but it's hard for the one guy to remember the 1,000.
Sure.
So when I meet people, some people find it annoying. I'll repeat the name. So, you know, if you came up to me at a show and said, "Hi, I'm Don Brown," I go, "Hi, Don, I'm Craig." And then within 30 seconds, I'm going to say Don again because now I've heard it a couple times. And then next time I see you, I still won't remember, but at least I'll remember the rest of the day. So
I'm so bad about it too, though. And I feel bad when it happens because, you know, somebody else, you know, grab my attention or whatever and start talking to me like, okay, it's so nice to meet you and see you. And occasionally once they start talking, I can figure it out. And then sometimes I'm like, "Darling, I am so sorry. Your face looks so familiar, but I cannot put a name to you."
Yeah. Or they'll say, "We're friends on Facebook." And I'm like, "Oh, we're acquaintances on Facebook. I've never met you. I'm happy to be your friend, but
right.
if that's the terminology we're using." So,
now, do you have a photo that is like your all-time favorite photo, like you just couldn't believe you got to capture it sort of situation, or like a top 5 or 10?
Yes.
Okay.
It was taken at Disney, and it's not anything that would be publishable or anything anybody would care about, even though it did get published on Disney's website.
Okay.
My wife and I went to Disney World on our honeymoon, and we said, "Well, we're going to come back in 10 years with whatever kids, if any, we have." And we had 3. So on the side of Cinderella Castle, and keep in mind it's Cinderella Castle, not Cinderella's Castle. There's no apostrophe S. It's just called Cinderella Castle, just like Lego. It's Lego. Legos is not the plural of Lego. They used to have what was called Story Time with Belle. And there was a little stage aside to the stonework and the big iron gate. And Belle would come out and they would invite kids to come up and put on the candlesticks and say, "I'm Lumiere," or whatever his name is, and put on the styrofoam, what's her name, Mrs. Potts, the teapot, or what have you. And so we were sitting in the front row and just a stone bench. And my son was young and was back with my wife standing, you know, in a stroller or something in the back. And my 2 daughters were sitting in the front row. And I had my back to that iron gate because I knew Belle was going to come out from behind that gate. And I wanted to get the expression of my daughters when they saw, and I made sure they hadn't seen a princess in person yet before this moment.
Okay.
We didn't go anywhere in the park where there were any princesses or anything. So I knew when that gate opened, I wanted to get their faces.
Mm-hmm.
So I sat there with my back to the gate, and I'm looking at the time, and I know the show's about to start, and I hear that gate creak. And the expression on my oldest daughter, I get choked up now even thinking about it, because when you first walk in my house, there's a 16 by 20 of this photo, and it's black and white. And my daughter's jaw literally drops, and there's a huge smile, like of amazement, like this, on my younger daughter. And it was on my oldest daughter's birthday. So she's got it's my birthday Disney button on and everything. And they're wearing their little dresses. And I just remember looking through the viewfinder and depressing that shutter, knowing that this was going to be one of the best frames that I'd ever captured in my life.
Absolutely.
And I looked down at it, and I just started crying. So then I sent it to Disney. They were like, "Hey, has anyone taken any cool photos or whatever? We want to put them on the website. And if you have a story behind them, give us your story." So I sent them that photo, and I said, I call this photo "Eyes on a Princess" because it's my daughter's eyes for the first time on a princess, and it's my eyes on my princess.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody wiped their eyes with the cleaner. And they put it on their website. And I was like, hey, this is pretty neato. So then a few after that, my younger daughter was like, oh, hey, wouldn't it be neat if we could go to Disney World on my birthday sometime? And I'm like, oh, yes, it would. Because at the time I was a big Disney fan, but my wife, not as much so. So I said, yeah, it would. We'll see. Maybe someday, honey. And then she'd ask a couple more times, but didn't bug about it. And then one time she said, well, if we can't go for my birthday, wouldn't it be special if we went for her brother's birthday? And I was like, okay, well, now you're going, because now you're looking out for your brother. Now we're going. So I remember we went to her school and picked her up from school, had the van already packed to go to the airport. The kids had no idea what was going on. And they brought her to the principal's office, and she thought she'd done something wrong. And she came to the principal's office, and all the ladies, who work, the administrators and the admin and everything in the office, they didn't know what was going on. They just knew it was coming picking up. And I said, hey, if you could have anything for your birthday, what would it be? And it was on her birthday. And she said to go to Disney World. And I said, well, then let's go. And that night she was in Magic Kingdom on her birthday.
Aww.
And all the ladies in the office were like, "Ooh, this is
That's
but
awesome.
No, that shot of my daughters looking up at Belle is I'll never top that. Never.
That's awesome.
Nothing. And I don't even try to, because it's not going to happen. After that, I bet it's a kiss pic. It is. Is a picture of Gene Simmons looking right at me.
Okay.
So I've got some pretty good kiss shots over the years, but they're easy and they play up to you. You're in the pit. You are in the pit. And it's almost like they're not paying attention to the crowd. They are looking right at you. And I swear Gene does this while he's playing, and he's looking at you, and he's holding the bass up, and he's doing the tongue on the bass, and he's doing the tongue. And then he looks at me and he goes like this, but down at his waist, like, do you got what you need? And I nod, and then he goes to the next guy. And I'm like, because they get it.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of the entertainment factor.
Entertainer. That's the problem. There's not that many entertainers anymore. I loved shooting Barry Manilow. I loved shooting Donnie and Marie. They were entertainers. They didn't sit up there on a stool like they were doing someone a favor by, playing their songs.
I have a hard time going to concerts because I'm like, I could listen to this at home. So unless whoever, the actual venue is for, like whatever the artist or entertainer is, they have to be very, very engaging and like storytelling. Otherwise, about like 15, 20 minutes in, I'm like, can we go now?
Well, then you'd be a good concert photographer, because you're usually done in 10 to 15 minutes. But I mean, to me, I want spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
And I like shooting from back at the soundboard, because I've got the lens to get up close if I want to. And a lot of people don't. I'm fortunate that I do. A lot of people don't have the money to buy that. I got a very good deal on mine. But when you're up close, I mean, if there's big bombast of things going on, especially in a stadium, I mean, shooting Coldplay at FedEx Field. Okay, there's like legit fireworks going off, not just, pyro on the stage. There's stuff going on in the stadium. You want to be back where you can get that. You can get in close. You can get in close if you want to, but stay back so you can get, some of the fun. So people hate that. They're like, you always want to shoot in front of house. I'm like, yeah, you're darn right. I want to shoot in front of house. It is what it is.
I think there's only one band that I would like to see because of the pyrotechnics, and their shows just always seem to be huge, is Rammstein.
Right.
There's shows like I can't even imagine what that atmosphere would have to feel like.
Well, it's almost like for them, and that's actually one group I've never shot, but they don't play in the U.S. very often.
Yeah.
To me, that's one show where like the music is almost ancillary. It's like, hey, come watch how much gas we can launch up into the air and how many things we can blow up. But and energy, you mentioned feeling, the energy. It's an unusual feeling when you're in a stadium and you're in the pit between the stage and the crowd. And the example I always use is One Direction. Whether you like them or not, or their music or that your style, it doesn't matter. For a while, they were the biggest thing in music, and they were great entertainers. They had a great stage show. They were engaging. I shot them, I think, 3 times. I loved it each time. But in Baltimore, they played M&T Stadium, the Ravens football stadium, and I think they said it was 75 to 85,000 people at that show, and the only way I can describe it is like you're standing on the tarmac listening to jet engines. And it was constant. It wasn't like, oh, they're gonna sing Diana, or they're gonna sing The Story of My Life. Now we're gonna be really loud. No, it was a constant drone of volume, of screams. And you could literally feel that air moving behind you. And I talked to Stuart Copeland about this because we had a chance to chat. I was like, I can see, I wouldn't do this because that's not how I'm wired, but I can see now how people get caught up in drugs and alcohol when you've been on that stage and you've felt that adulation and just the movement of air coming at you for 2.5 hours. And everything is focused on you. And if you're a high enough profile artist and you're shuffled into that limo and they throw the, terry cloth robe and the towel over your head and they push you in that cargo van and get you back to the hotel and get you up to the floor that only you are on and, lock that elevator off so nothing can happen to the meal ticket so you can get to the next city.
Yeah.
How do you come down from that?
Sure.
What do? You lie in bed and look at the ceiling. Well, one, you should be thanking God that you're living that lifestyle.
Yeah.
But I said, like, I'm not wired that way, but I could see where people might feel, I can't let this feeling go. Maybe this substance will help me maintain it.
Sure. Well, I think it's that. And I think the other aspect to that too is I can't imagine being a celebrity, is really as amazing as, the media wants to make it. It's got to be exhausting.
It is exhausting. No.
I mean, I somewhat understand what it feels like to be popular, when people are constantly like talking to you or, they want something from you. But I can't imagine feeling like I couldn't go to the grocery store without somebody recognizing me. And then I still have to expel that energy because I still have that persona that I have to keep. I could see where that substance aspect would really come in for that, to be able to drown out all of that at some point.
Right. And the other issue is the public's perception, or more often than not, misperception of who you are and what you're like when you're not on that stage.
Mhm.
I did some pre-show work with Bruno Mars a few years ago, and they had a few people come in, for some meet and greet photos and such, a couple sponsors and clients and things. And he was wearing a super nice guy, by the way, super nice guy. He's just wearing like a Gucci hoodie, a gray Gucci hoodie, and some gray sweatpants. He's
Mhm.
not wearing any stage apparel or wardrobe or anything like that.
Right.
And a guy comes in and he's like, man, Bruno, dripping out with all of the Gucci and blah, blah, blah. He's got his Gucci, hoodie. He's got his Gucci pants. And he said, brother, these pants are from Walmart, and I just pulled this hoodie on. And the guy's like, no way. Bruno don't get his clothes from Walmart. And he goes, these pants are from Walmart. So, sometimes people come in with this expectation of Bruno Mars would never wear anything that's not custom made, or
Right.
the threads on the tag of his hoodie are made of gold. No, they're just people,
Mhm.
that are a lot
Yeah.
more recognizable to others than you and I are.
Yep.
But it's fun.
All right. Well, anything else you want to add? Because we're at an hour and 16 minutes. So I usually try to keep it to about an hour.
Oh, sorry. I talked too long.
No, it's fine.
I blame Larry for his
I always blame Larry. It's fine.
for interjecting. No, I appreciate your time. It was a pleasure chatting with you. I hope I've been able to, share a little bit of insight or some silly story here and there. And if anybody, in all seriousness, and I tell people this at wrestling events, and anyone is always welcome at any time to send me a PM or, a message on Instagram or Facebook or wherever you find me. I try to be really good about answering questions and, offering advice. Not that anybody wants any from me, but I enjoy doing that. I'm never put out by it. So I welcome that for anyone who may be viewing, whoever wants to.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that you did this because it was so very, very random. We were talking about lights, and then it's like, hey, you want to do it? And you're like, yeah, sure.
No, it was delightful. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I know you're a busy guy.
You're welcome. Have a great evening.
All right. Well, you too.
Bye, Larry.
Bye.
I love you,
Bye,
Larry.
guys. Aw.